Today's story is about a boy who was only 19 years old, but because of committing a serious crime, he was sent to that prison in California where every inmate was either a murderer or had committed a very serious crime. He spent a long time in this prison with great peace, but after 4 years something happened in this prison that turned him into the most dangerous and feared prisoner. At the last moment, in front of the government lawyer who was fighting this boy's case, such revelations came out that completely changed the direction of the entire case, and the American government had to give this boy $5.2 million as compensation. So, who was this prisoner who had to go to jail at the mere age of 19? And how did he become such a dangerous and feared prisoner, after which the revelations that came shocked everyone? The boy this story is about was named Reggie Cole, whose parents, in 1985, moved their family to Los Angeles. The area of Los Angeles where his family shifted was a dangerous area where many small criminal gangs were active, and because of them, incidents used to happen frequently. Including Reggie, there were 4 siblings, and Reggie was the youngest. At this time, he was only 10 years old. But his elder brother, who was 15 years old, because of bad company, joined one of the criminal gangs there. He often started doing robberies, lootings, and fighting with other gangs, and for this, he had to pay a very big price. It happened that one day people from another gang suddenly attacked Reggie's brother's gang. They started firing at them, and in that, a bullet directly hit Kenny, Reggie's brother, in the head, and he died on the spot. After the death of his brother Kenny, Reggie was completely broken, but he tried to put all his focus on his studies to forget his brother's death. His family was also completely supporting him in this matter. But all of them were unaware that from here Reggie's life was about to take a new turn. Because Reggie was very close to his brother Kenny, he knew very well all the members of the criminal gang with whom Kenny stayed. Slowly, he also started roaming around with those gang members, because of which he lost interest in studies. Finally, Reggie decided that he too would choose the world of crime just like his brother. There were several reasons behind this decision. The first reason was the divorce of his parents. The second reason was that both of his sisters got married and went to live in different cities. Because of this, Reggie became completely lonely. Although Reggie was living with his mother, after his brother's death he felt very alone. To fill this emptiness, he joined a criminal gang. After joining this gang, he started supplying drugs and marijuana. Because of this, at the age of just 16, he was sent to juvenile detention for the first time. And just a few weeks after being released from there, the police again arrested him for possessing weapons. After being released from jail, Reggie again started walking on the path of crime and restarted the supply of drugs and marijuana. But by 1994, he committed such a crime after which his life changed forever. By this time, Reggie had turned 19 years old. This time, he was arrested for murdering a man outside a brothel. Although Reggie kept saying again and again that he had not committed this murder, even then the police arrested him and charged him with murder. This was the same case that changed Reggie's life. And finally, when the truth of this case came out, the ground slipped from under the court's feet. Anyway, after the trial started in court, all the evidence came out against Reggie, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. After this, he was sent to California's Calipatria State Prison. This prison is considered one of the most dangerous prisons in America, because here the most dangerous criminals of America were kept. Anyway, Reggie, along with the other prisoners, sat in a bus and left for the prison. On the whole way, Reggie noticed that the road leading to the prison was completely deserted. After a short while, he saw Calipatria Prison, which was built in the middle of a completely isolated place. Reggie saw that armed guards were standing around the complex. As the prison was coming closer, Reggie's heartbeat was increasing. And as soon as the bus entered the prison, a very strong stench entered Reggie's nose, to avoid which he bent his head down. During this time, Reggie saw that this prison was covered all around with iron grills. And these were no ordinary grills, because electric current was flowing through them, and anyone touching them could die. Every prisoner in this prison knew this very well, and that is why till now no one had ever tried to escape. One reason for running current through these grills was also that the guards could put their entire focus on the prisoners inside the prison, instead of outside. Because in this prison, compared to prisoners, guards were very few. One guard had to watch over 50 prisoners. 3 months before Reggie came to this prison, a very famous incident had happened here. 5 prisoners of this prison got into a fight with guards, and in this fight, the prisoners stabbed 8 guards. This incident became so famous that its news spread all across California. Anyway, this bus carrying Reggie and other prisoners finally reached the main building of the prison, where the old prisoners started looking at all the new ones very carefully. As soon as the bus stopped, a guard came out and started calling out each prisoner one by one whose names were on the list he had. After getting off the bus, all the prisoners were taken to the inspection room, where they were stripped completely and searched, to check if they were hiding anything inside their body. After that, all these prisoners were made to wear uniforms and were sent to their cells. The cells of this prison were no less than a torture chamber, because there was neither any window nor any way for air to come in. All the doors were made of iron, with just a small gap to look outside. Inside the cell, there were 2 beds, 1 basin, and 1 toilet. As soon as Reggie entered his cell, he saw that a prisoner was sleeping on the lower bed. This was the first prisoner because of whom Reggie's journey to becoming dangerous began. That prisoner looked at Reggie, but Reggie turned his face away because he did not want to make any eye contact. Reggie did this because he believed that if he wanted to spend his time in this prison properly, then he should not come into the eyes of any prisoner. That is why he had decided that he would neither talk to any prisoner nor make any friends. So, he directly went to his upper bed and lay down. Only 2 weeks had passed since Reggie came to prison, when one day a group of prisoners entered his cell. Seeing them, Reggie's cellmates started behaving nicely so that they would not do anything wrong with him. But suddenly, that group of prisoners attacked him and raped him. Reggie was lying on his bed, hearing everything, but he was so scared and nervous that he pretended to be asleep so that they would not harm him. Since Reggie's cellmate neither fought nor shouted, it now became a routine of those prisoners. They often entered his cell and raped him. Reggie now understood that to survive in this prison, he would have to fight. Because due to fear, either prisoners were raped, or they were badly injured. During this time, Reggie noticed one thing. Many prisoners in this prison had knives, which they had made themselves from the things available. Prisoners used to sharpen wooden pieces or iron scraps and make them like knives and use them when needed. Seeing this, Reggie also decided that he would make a knife for himself so that when the time came, he could protect himself. Now the biggest question in front of Reggie was how he would make this knife. Then, he took out his toothbrush and started sharpening it on a stone. He kept rubbing the toothbrush on the stone until it turned into a sharp weapon. After a while, he had made a knife out of his toothbrush with which he could kill anyone. All prisoners in this prison were given some free time in which they could read, play, or talk with each other. During this time, Reggie noticed that most of the prisoners were part of some gang. They played, sat, and hung out with their own groups. Seeing this, Reggie thought that to stay safe in prison, he too would have to join a gang that could support him and protect him. But the biggest problem was that these gangs never included anyone just like that. For this, any prisoner had to prove himself by doing something brave. So Reggie started observing all the gangs very carefully, to understand how one could join them. And then one day, something happened that made him a well-known name in this prison. Every gang now wanted him to join them. One morning, Reggie was walking alone in the prison ground, when suddenly a group of prisoners surrounded him. In this group was one prisoner who looked very tall and broad, and he was also the leader of this group. The leader of that group grabbed Reggie by the neck and pushed him against the fence, pressing him hard. Reggie saw that other prisoners standing nearby were also watching this scene, and everyone's eyes were on him. At that very moment, memories of the torture and rape of his cellmate flashed in his mind. Reggie realized that if he did not fight back here to save himself, then he too would suffer the same torture every day, just like his cellmate. Not only that, but other prisoners would also start seeing him as weak and an easy target. As this thought struck his mind, Reggie quickly pulled out the toothbrush he had sharpened into a knife and in a blink, stabbed the group leader in the waist. The attack was not meant to kill, because if he had intended that, he could have been given the death penalty. He did it only to send a clear message to the other inmates, that he was not an easy target, and messing with him could be dangerous. The sudden attack made the group scatter. Their leader too let go of Reggie to avoid being struck again. After this incident, every prisoner in the jail began to see Reggie as a dangerous inmate. His respect inside the prison increased, and soon a gang approached him with a proposal to join them. Reggie, who had been living in isolation for a long time and was already seeking a gang for protection, immediately accepted. With this gang, he finally felt safe and could survive prison more easily. However, what Reggie didn't know was that inside this prison, there was one inmate whose rule dominated everyone. He was called the king of the prison. And one day, Reggie was destined to come face to face with him. This inmate was none other than Eddie Clark, also known as El Diablo, which meant the devil. El Diablo was the most dangerous and feared prisoner in the entire jail. Prison was like a home for him. He ran his drug operations from inside with the help of other inmates and even prison guards. That he was truly dangerous could be understood from the fact that not only prisoners but even guards feared him. He was treated specially just so peace could be maintained in the prison. You may wonder, peace, in prison? But believe me, things could have been much worse. Most of the prisoners there were murderers or had committed extremely serious crimes. A large fight could easily turn the prison into absolute hell. To prevent that, guards gave El Diablo special treatment so he could keep control. El Diablo took full advantage of this fear. He did whatever he wanted. He lived however he pleased. Nobody, neither inmate nor guard, dared stop him. Meanwhile, Reggie was adjusting with his new gang. He often played basketball with them and spent his free time in their company. He felt safe and even somewhat happy now. But he was unaware that soon his life would change again, and he would become the most dangerous inmate of the prison. Reggie knew one thing very well: inside this prison, he had to do everything to survive, but he must never draw El Diablo's attention. If he did, it would mean big trouble. The shocking part was that El Diablo was only 34 years old and already the most feared. By the age of 14, he had already killed a boy, which sent him to juvenile detention. After 4 years there, he came out at 18. Almost immediately, he joined a criminal gang. Within days, he was arrested again. This time, he had broken into a house, injured an old woman, and murdered her son. For this, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Since then, he had been locked inside this prison. The biggest problem with El Diablo was his unpredictable temper. Sometimes, he even attacked his own men. Nobody was safe around him. Reggie, on the other hand, stayed quiet, avoided fights, and spent his time improving himself. For years passed this way. During this time, Reggie built a strong body and worked on his fitness. By now, he was 23 years old. That body and strength would soon become his greatest weapon. Meanwhile, El Diablo had grown addicted to alcohol. His drunkenness, mixed with his violent rage, filled the prison with terror. He stabbed or assaulted people just for staring at him. His reign of fear grew every day. Reggie, however, continued to live quietly, avoiding El Diablo's gaze. But in October 2000, something happened that changed everything. That morning, inmates were in the yard playing and talking when suddenly one prisoner picked up a rock and hit a guard's back. The guard turned angrily and ordered all inmates to lie on the ground. As he searched, he found a homemade knife lying nearby. Likely, some prisoner had dropped it to avoid being caught during the search. What the guards didn't know was that this knife belonged to one of El Diablo's closest men, his most trusted ally. To protect him, El Diablo could go to any extent. The guard held up the knife and asked whose it was. Everyone knew, but silence fell. No one dared speak. If anyone betrayed the truth, it could cost their life. Among those lying on the ground was El Diablo. He slowly raised his head, looking around, trying to pin the blame on someone. His eyes landed on Reggie. Reggie immediately knew what was happening. El Diablo was about to frame him. Moments later, El Diablo pointed directly at Reggie and told the guard, "This knife belongs to him." Reggie was not afraid of the punishment for possessing a weapon, he was already serving life. What worried him was his reputation. If others thought he was weak, if El Diablo could frame him so easily, then he would once again become an easy target for the entire prison. So when the guard asked him about the knife, Reggie firmly said, "No. That knife is not mine." Just a few words, but they changed his life forever. From that moment, Reggie had become El Diablo's enemy. The entire prison was shocked. Nobody had ever dared to go against El Diablo. Although Reggie did not see El Diablo again in the following days, he knew the man would not forget. He could be attacked at any moment. His fear grew so strong that he could barely sleep at night. During the day, he constantly watched El Diablo and his men in the yard, staying close to guards for safety. Barely a month later, in November 2000, one morning while Reggie was walking in the yard, he saw El Diablo approaching. Fear shook his entire body. Before he could react, El Diablo grabbed his left shoulder, pulled out a knife, and stabbed him in the waist. Reggie panicked in shock as El Diablo dropped the knife to the ground and walked away. Blood poured from Reggie's wound, but not a single inmate came forward to help. Everyone looked away, pretending they had seen nothing. Moments later, the prison siren rang, signaling the end of yard time. Inmates lined up for the routine search before returning to their cells. El Diablo stood first in line. Reggie was fourth, pressing his hand against his wound to hide it from guards. He had secretly dug a small hole in the yard earlier and hidden a knife there. Just before lining up, he retrieved it and kept it hidden on his body. This time, he had made up his mind. Something very dangerous was about to happen. The guards began their search, starting with El Diablo. They checked him and told him to turn around. As he did, El Diablo looked back at the prisoners behind him, and his eyes landed on Reggie. He smiled faintly. And then, before anyone could realize, Reggie stepped out of line, rushed forward, and plunged his knife deep into El Diablo's throat. Everyone froze in shock. Nobody could believe what they had just seen. El Diablo collapsed to the ground, pulling the knife from his throat, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. But it was too late. Within moments, he had lost too much blood. He gasped for air, and died right there. The most feared prisoner, the devil of the jail, was gone in a single strike. Immediately, Reggie lay down on the ground and surrendered, telling the guards, "I know what I did. I didn't want other prisoners' lives to be in danger. That is why I killed El Diablo." Guards quickly restrained him, put him into solitary confinement, and the entire prison was placed on high alert. Because the guards feared that after El Diablo's death, the prison would be thrown into chaos, all prisoners were locked in their cells. They were no longer allowed to step outside for any activity. Now, another murder charge had been added against Reggie. This meant that, during his trial, he could even be sentenced to death. And in this case, every guard and every inmate was a witness to the murder. The only way to avoid a death sentence was for Reggie to prove in court that he killed in self-defense. And to a large extent, this was true. The court accepted this reasoning, but even then, instead of sentencing him to death, it sentenced Reggie to 10 years of solitary confinement. By law, every criminal is given a public defender who fights their case for free. Reggie was presented with the names of 3 or 4 lawyers from which he could choose one. Since he had already lost hope of surviving this sentence, he didn't pay much attention and randomly picked one. His chosen lawyer's name was Christopher Blood. But Christopher did something Reggie had never imagined, even in his dreams. Just a few days after beginning work on the case, Christopher found details that completely changed the direction of the entire trial. He started digging into the murder case from 1994, the very case that had sent Reggie to prison in the first place. The man who had been murdered was Felipe Gonzalez, a 29-year-old. 2 police officers were assigned to investigate this case, and during their inquiry at the brothel where the murder occurred, they found a man who had witnessed everything. This man was the caretaker of the brothel, and his name was John Jones. Because John was an eyewitness, the police brought him to the station for questioning. John told the officers that on the night of the murder, he was standing on the 2nd floor of the brothel when he saw Felipe Gonzalez park his car outside. Felipe knocked on the door, saying he wanted to meet someone inside. But from inside, someone told him that the person he wanted to see wasn't there. Hearing this, Felipe turned back toward his car. But before he could leave, 3 teenage boys with guns surrounded him, demanding money. Because Felipe wasn't American, he couldn't understand what the boys were saying. Suddenly, the 3 opened fire, killing him on the spot, before fleeing into the bushes. John noticed something else. While running away, one of the boys was limping. It seemed like he had also been shot in the leg during the firing. Among the 2 police officers investigating, one was a young female officer. This was her first case, and she wanted to close it quickly to build her record. She began looking for any criminal who had been arrested that night for any crime. Among them was Reggie, who was only 19 years old at the time. Reggie was involved with a gang that sold marijuana, and once, during gang violence, he had been shot in the leg. As a result, he walked with a slight limp. The female officer became convinced that Reggie must have been one of the killers of Felipe Gonzalez. After all, John had described the shooters as teenagers, and one of them limped. Reggie fit that description perfectly. Based only on this, the police arrested him and sent him to prison. Now, as Christopher dug deeper, he uncovered evidence proving that Reggie was innocent and had been paying for a crime he never committed. It took Christopher 3 years to build this proof scientifically and beyond doubt. His first argument was that Felipe Gonzalez had been shot from an elevated position. The angle of the bullet wounds made it clear the shooter had been firing from inside the brothel, not directly in front of Felipe. This suggested that perhaps John himself, the brothel caretaker, was the killer, and that he invented his story to mislead the police. The second piece of evidence was that no fingerprints or DNA belonging to Reggie were ever found at the crime scene. Nor was there any witness who could confirm that Reggie was present that night. During the trial, the police also brought John into court to testify again. But his testimony shocked everyone. John confessed that he had told the police exactly what they wanted him to say. He explained that because he ran a brothel, the police often harassed him. They promised to leave him alone if he testified according to their wishes. The most powerful piece of evidence Christopher presented was about Reggie's leg injury. Medical records proved that Reggie had been shot when he was just 13 years old, a full 6 years before Felipe's murder. The female officer investigating the case had known this, but since it was her first case and she wanted a quick success, she deliberately ignored the truth and framed Reggie. That was why, at the time of his arrest, Reggie had cried out repeatedly that he was innocent, but nobody listened. For 3 long years, Christopher continued working on this case while Reggie remained in solitary confinement for killing El Diablo. Finally, Christopher took the case back to court. After reviewing the evidence, the court declared that Reggie had nothing to do with Felipe Gonzalez's murder and that he was innocent. Hearing this, Reggie broke down in tears. But because he had indeed killed El Diablo, he still had to serve his 10-year solitary confinement sentence. However, since he had already served 8 years in prison for the false murder charge, those years were deducted from his sentence. This meant that Reggie now had to spend only 2 more years in prison. In 2009, Reggie was released. After his release, he filed a lawsuit against the police department for wrongfully framing him. Finally, in 2017, Reggie won the case. The Los Angeles Police Department was ordered to pay him $5.2 million as compensation. Of course, this money could not bring back the years he lost, but it could make his future life easier and give him the chance to live a better life. This was the story of a 19-year-old boy whose life changed after the death of his brother, who was wrongfully imprisoned, who endured everything he had never imagined, and who even killed the most dangerous prisoner in the jail. Yet, he never gave up, and at last, he was freed from a false case. The saddest part is that because of one police officer's desire to close her first case quickly and gain success, an innocent man lost the best years of his life behind bars.